I think the report we've seen today from the Gambling Commission is extremely worrying. People have seen me on here saying many, many times, I'm not anti-gambling, but I'm anti-problem gambling. And when we've seen people as young as 11 years old being able to access gambling through, what should be harmless things like computer games, that for me says actually the whole industry needs looking at pretty quickly, because quite frankly, if this is the stats we're seeing today, if things aren't put in place to put protections there for those vulnerable young people, we could see this escalate quite dramatically, I believe.
And what is it in those games that sort of attract children into gambling?
Well, of course, one of the things is if, like anything else, if you're playing on any sort of computer game, you might want to try and upgrade or power up. And in my day and age, that would just be clicking on a button, perhaps. What we see now is some of these organisations and companies frankly exploiting young people and their desire to kind of progress in these games to the point of actually, making them tens of thousands, as we've seen today here in the UK, becoming problem gamblers. And what that can lead to down the line, of course, is issues like we've spoken about on these sofas many times, on the problems around things like fixed odds betting terminals. In some cases, if people become problem gamblers before, almost a decade before they're even allowed to gamble, that's the start of a huge problem, and we need to nip it in the bud as soon as possible.
And this is the latest report. Is the legislation up to date?
Well, I think that's part of the problem we've seen, not just with fixed odds betting terminals, but also these skin gambling, as it's generally known, is in some cases we've got analogue laws for a digital situation. And what we need to see pretty urgently, but supported by people like the Gambling Commission, and we also need to see the video games industry step up as well. They need to act responsibly. It is to ensure that the lessons need to be learned quickly. If we've got 25,000 problem gamblers, for people who are not old enough to gamble, then we need to do something about that urgently. From my perspective, my political party launched a new campaign body last week, the Labour campaign for gambling reform, and I'm really proud to be an initial member of that. We're looking at things like FOBTs, but we're also looking at the wider issue of gambling, whether that's skin gambling that we're talking about today, or things like advertising on sports industry, which we've seen a huge increase in as well. As I've always said, I'm not anti-gambling, but I'm absolutely anti-problem gambling.